Guide us and give us wisdom for the many decisions we are faced with. May you lead us, give us direction, and give us a strong spirit to face not only the challenges that face this community, but also for the challenges that we face in our day-to-day lives. We pray for protection for all those that serve on the front lines for the city, county, and this country. Lord, we pray that in all we do, we look to you to be our guide. Thank you for loving us. We ask all these in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. I will now call to order the Monday, October 19th, 2020 City Council meeting. And I also want to note that we do have a call-in option. So for people who would like to phone in, the number is 404-397-1516. The meeting number is 146-274-8004, and the meeting password is 1234. We do have an additional room available for extra distancing this evening, and we ask that people maintain their distance while in council chambers. And we also have a requirement that masks be worn at City Hall. For those that cannot mask or don't, we also have the call-in option available this evening. So welcome, everyone, and I've called the meeting to order. Mrs. Donaldson, roll call, please.
Fitzwater.
Present.
Graham.
Here.
Hensley.
Present.
Hussey.
Here.
Kimna.
Here.
Lester.
Here.
Schreiber.
Present.
Vogt.
Here.
Ward. Here. Wiseman. Present.
And I want to note Councilman Vogt is joining us by phone, as you heard him a moment ago on the roll call, and he wanted me to make sure and announce that he is just as engaged. The fact that he is not here for this important meeting. He is distancing this evening, though, because he has been in contact with somebody who had tested positive, so he has made the decision to remain away from people, and I would encourage that and appreciate his decision not to be here this evening, but he will be participating and voting this evening. Item 3, is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
And we may make a motion to adopt it with a change this evening. So I would ask for a motion to adopt the agenda by moving Resolution 2020 number 12, which is the UDC marker, to move that under right after item 10. So is there a motion with that amended agenda?
So moved.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. I think that was unanimous. Motion passes. So for those in the audience, the UDC Resolution 2020-12, so that you don't have to wait till the very end, will be taken up after item 10. Item 4, miscellaneous agenda items. So this is a very important item this evening, and this deals with the Mayor's Mask Up Mid-Mo initiative. And we have with us this evening on the line some representatives from our local hospitals and healthcare providers. So I would like to welcome, we have with us this evening representatives from Capital Region Hospital. We have Dr. Haight with us on the line. We have from St. Mary's Hospital, Dr. Stewart. From JCMG, Dr. Robbins. And the Community Health Center, Dr. Sullivan. So we have them on the line this evening, and we are having them join us remotely because we are using that as an example that, for one, when we have an opportunity to engage remotely, that we should take that opportunity to do that. So we are being good examples of that. And also, we are showing our collaboration with our health providers on this very important message. So the Mayor's Mask Up Mid-Mo initiative, what is that? So we're all very familiar with Selfie with the Mayor and hashtag, but we are doing a new hashtag, Mask Up with the Mayor, and we are asking people to utilize that and take advantage of that and be good examples of wearing masks in the community. And also realizing that masking is not the only option, that we have several responsibilities that we need to do, and I have our healthcare providers on the line to give us some feedback and some insight into what kind of guidance we should be following. So I will start with Dr. Haight. So Dr. Haight, you're on the line, and the others that may be on the line, if they would mute, we've got some feedback and background noise, so if you're on the line, go ahead and mute. But I will ask Dr. Haight from Capital Region Hospital. Are you on, Dr. Haight?
Yes. Can you hear me, Mayor Turgeon?
We can hear you loud and clear. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. We just wanted to make sure that everyone knows that we are having a serious health crisis right now with the COVID-19, and that we as a community need to do everything we can to slow the spread of COVID-19. So first of all, we continue to encourage physically distancing from one another, as Mayor Turgeon has said often tonight already, and traditionally that has been 6 feet or further. Secondly, it is important that we continue to wash our hands. Again, washing with soap for 20 seconds is ideal, but if you don't have access to that, then hand sanitizers would be a close second. We're also encouraging people to wear masks when they're out and about in groups, and especially when physical distancing is not possible. The masks are more helpful in protecting you from giving COVID-19 to someone else if you would have symptoms or asymptomatic. We also encourage everyone, if they're sick, to stay home and to call their physician's office for instruction. And certainly, if you've been exposed or showing symptoms, or you have tested positive, to quarantine yourself as the county health department and or your healthcare provider instructs you to do. Just personally speaking, I also encourage people to take time, go outside and walk and enjoy the great weather, and to get away from the TV and the radio, the Facebook and everything that is out there, just to protect all of our mental health and be outside and enjoy the great weather.
Thank you, Dr. Haight. We appreciate your insight on that, and we will take note of that. We also have from St. Mary's Hospital, SSM, we have Dr. Stewart on the line.
Yes, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Welcome, everybody. I don't want to go back over everything Dr. Haight said. He did a very good job of stating exactly what our group, this group tonight feels is important for the community. I did want to let you know that it is becoming very apparent that COVID is increasing in our area. Just so you know, in the last 6 weeks, the per 1,000 cases has went from about 4 to almost 11, and our positive rate went to 15. And I was just on an MHA call that it was very important to know that our capacity to take care of ICU patients is becoming increasingly restricted in the area. Most of the hospitals have been on diversion for quite some time, off and on, especially with ICU patients. So I can't think that we shouldn't do everything that Dr. Haight says, take care of ourselves, but take care of our community, and understand the flu season is upon us, and this will potentially increase hospitalizations, and I think we just need to make sure that we're all using good hand hygiene, socially distancing, and especially wearing face coverings so that we decrease the chance, if we do have this, spreading it to others.
Thank you, Dr. Stewart. And then from JCMG, we have Dr. Robbins.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Turgeon. I thought I would just expand on the excellent advice and information from Dr. Haight and Dr. Stewart in regard to face masks, to really encourage people to wear them, of course, but also when you are wearing, avoid repeat touching and adjusting of them. And a lot of people tend to want to pull their mask down when they're speaking to someone that they know, and of course that's counterproductive. It's kind of a an impulse I think people have, but that defeats the purpose of wearing the mask. The other thing, of course, that we really try to hammer home is the social distancing for a minimum of 6 feet, and a lot of the studies suggest that 10 feet is preferable. And finally, a lot of people seem to feel like wearing a face mask or cover of any kind is an infringement, excuse me, on their rights or freedoms. But I'd really like to remind everyone of the importance of the call to all of us for social responsibility. That is, if you're not worried for yourself, be concerned for your neighbor. That is, those that may be vulnerable to this potentially devastating disease. Please consider them. You know, you wouldn't want your parents, your grandparents, or any loved one to contract this disease if you're carrying it and end up becoming very ill or even dying from it. And that's about it. That's what I wanted to really encourage people in regard to.
Thank you, Dr. Robbins. And we have from the Community Health Center, Dr. Sullivan.
Yes. Can you hear me?
You may speak up a little bit louder, but I think so.
Okay. My colleagues, have given great information. I just wanted to add that it's also important to remember to see your healthcare provider during this time for your normal healthcare needs. Our clinics are open, and we're taking all the necessary precautions. We just want to make sure you stay up to date on your preventative screening, things like the flu vaccine, the management of your chronic conditions like diabetes or hypertension. And we just wanted to remind everyone, to please don't put off obtaining your routine care during this time.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. And from the Cole County Health Department, Christy Campbell, the director, was not able to join us, so she has sent me her remarks. And she says the Cole County Health Department encourages everyone to continue to be responsible for their actions and protect others. For yourself, get plenty of rest and exercise, take your vitamins, and stay home if you are sick. Get your flu shot to protect yourself this flu season. Adhere to physical distancing requirements and limit contact with others outside of your household. In addition to limiting social interactions, the Cole County Health Department is still strongly recommending that everyone take precautionary measures to reduce the spread of the virus. Adhere to all social distancing requirements and do not be within 6 feet of others outside of your household for more than 15 minutes. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds, especially before eating, and if not available, use hand sanitizer. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth with unwashed hands. Cover your mouth, nose with tissue, elbow, or sleeve when coughing or sneezing. Wear a face covering when close contact cannot be avoided and physical distancing cannot be maintained. Cloth coverings are not considered an acceptable substitute for social distancing. Interactions within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes will be considered exposure, regardless if the person is wearing a cloth face covering. Cloth face covering should be washed after each use. Cloth face covering should be replaced frequently, as consistent washing will degrade the fabric and decrease effectiveness. Cole County Health Department also has a community testing event. You can register online. The event is October 27th, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. You can register at health.mo.gov/community test. Again, it's health.mo.gov/community test, October 27th, 9 to 5, in Cole County at First Assembly of God, 1900 SSRC, Jefferson City is the address for Cole County. Also, Cole County Health Department has guidelines for safe Halloween tips. So I appreciate our hospital providers being on the line with us and showing that we are communicating a consistent message with the community together. And I think as elected officials that we are often looked at to make these decisions and work together to get the message out to our community. And it holds even more weight when we have the backing of our hospitals and health providers. And that's why I appreciate the time that our health leaders in the community are taking. I know that we all listen to the mayor, but we really listen to our doctors in the community. So I ask you, as your mayor, to please take to heart what all of our physicians on the line have said and listen to our doctors, because we really have that expectation that these things need to be followed. And I know we've heard them time and time again over the last several months, but we have to remain diligent about this, because we want our city to remain open, we want our economy to remain open, but we all want to stay healthy during that process. So please help us and do your part. Mask up with the mayor and keep back 6 feet at least. I know that in our discussion with our healthcare leaders, they said physical distancing is everything. Physical distancing is everything, because all these other things that we have to do, we need to do them alongside physical distancing. So please keep that in mind, and you will start to see a lot more messaging coming out, unified messaging from our health providers together. And I think we're a very lucky community that all of our hospitals are working together with us, along with our government leaders, to get this message out. So I thank them all for being on the line, and thank you for being a good example by being distanced and doing this virtually and calling into our meeting. We appreciate all of you. And on behalf of the city, we will look forward to continuing our communication and continuing to get that message out. So with that, are there any council questions or comments at this time? All right. Well, I would encourage you all to participate and mask up like our council members have been great examples of doing, and appreciate the community and the public for doing that as well. So at this time then, we will move on, and thank you all for being on the line. We will move on to the next item on the agenda. And I also want to give a reminder that to sign up to speak this evening, Emily, where's the sign-up sheet if people haven't yet? Emily has it there, so she's over there if you haven't signed up and do want to speak. We're going to move on to item B, and we have an exciting miscellaneous agenda item. So we have with us Roxy Van Poel to present the Stephen Sillers Tunnels to Tower 5K Fastest Firehouse Trophy, along with Chief Schofield and our fire department team. So welcome, and tell us a little bit about this.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, City Council, for giving us this opportunity. 3 of the 4 team members are here with us tonight. The 4th is with his dad in the hospital. So with that, I will hand it over to our volunteer coordinator, Roxy Van Poel.
Okay. Thank you, Chief Schofield. Real quickly, before we get started, awarding this, our traveling trophy to the Jeff City Fire Department team again this year, I do want to mention that the Stephen Siller Tunnel to Towers Foundation is a foundation that was started to benefit our first responders and military. And I also want to mention that this year alone in the state of Missouri, the Tunnel to Towers has paid off the mortgage for 3 first responders' families who were killed in the line of duty. And I think that's very a testament to this foundation and what they'll do for our first responders.
Well, thank you. Roxy, you've been involved in this every year. Now it's in its 5th year locally.
Right.
And your passion and dedication to this cause, we are very appreciative of that. And we are extremely proud of our fire department. And for those that haven't seen this in action, they are running in their full gear. I think it's hard enough to do that just without all of that on, but to see that is, it's an image that is very impressive, and we're extremely proud of our fire department and especially of your team in doing this and bringing this trophy home again, bringing it back here to Jefferson City Fire Department. So if people want to get involved, Roxy, how can they reach out to you if they want to join this effort?
We do have a Facebook page. It's at T2T Jeff City, and you can get online, go to our Facebook page, message me there. We have an email address. It's very simple also, jefferson2towers.org. And if you send me an email, I'll be happy to respond and get people involved. We do take sponsorships, of course, to keep our event here going, as well as to support the foundation nationwide, and just to put on a good event every year. Next year we'll be commemorating the 20th anniversary of 9/11. That's very important to us, to make sure that our young people coming up today don't forget the sacrifice that was made by so many on that day. and we hope that we have a lot of people join us that day for not only the 5K, but there will be the Fire Marshal stair climb that day, I understand, as well as a parade is planned. So we'll have a lot of events in downtown Jefferson City on 9/11.
Wonderful. Well, we appreciate all your effort, and I know, did you just do introductions in the beginning, or should
No.
we just have? Okay, wonderful. If you would each want to, and if there's anything you want to add in addition to introductions, please, we'll let you all have a moment to tell us a little bit about this.
My name's Travis Milne. I'm a firefighter at Squad 5.
Ryan Back, Captain on Squad 5.
Jake Hawley, Captain on Engine 1.
And as Chief Schofield said, Mike Bainbridge was not able to make it tonight. His father is ill, but, we send our prayers and thoughts to him and his family.
Absolutely.
And I want to, so at this time, I want to present our traveling trophy to the winning team. And it is quite a sight to see. If for no other reason, don't go out to our Facebook page, but to see a photo of these guys as they came across the finish line. They were hot. They were hot. All right, and here is a medal.
We appreciate that, and that was quite a sight to see you all come across the finish line, and we are always behind you in everything you do every day in your jobs and protecting us and keeping our city safe, and we are especially proud that you're bringing this trophy back home for the fastest firehouse. That is a really big deal, and we appreciate it. So we would love to get a picture if you all want to come forward, and Gail isn't here, but I don't know who may want to. Steve might want to take our picture. And does council have any comments? If not, we will get our picture. Congratulations.
Sure. Sorry for the noise. There we go. Yep. All right. 1, 2, 3. And do one. Roxy's. All right. Behind the mask.
All right, item 5, we have public hearings. We have Bill 2020-34.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson approving a preliminary PUD plan for property located at 311 Bolivar Street.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As the clerk read, this bill would approve a preliminary PUD plan for development of property located at 311 Bolivar Street. There is a bill amendment sheet that has been distributed to you by the Law Department in advance of the meeting. To orient you to the location of this request, up on the screen is a location map on top of the zoning map. The property is located on the northeast corner of Bolivar Street and West McHardy Street, as shown. This is an aerial photo of the property. It's property that was transferred to the current owners from the Housing Authority, and the owners are under a development agreement of sorts to develop the property with the Housing Authority. The property is also notable in that it shares an alley with Fire Station Number 1. Fire Station occasionally uses that alley in an emergency capacity, and so that is a particular item of concern as we reviewed this development plan. Up on the screen is the preliminary PUD plan for development of the property. Includes construction of a 2-story building that would be used as a combination coffee house and roastery, and then as well as the retail capacity there, and also an Airbnb style rental residence within the structure. There's 2 parking lots that would be constructed on the property, as shown up on the screen. The larger parking lot with access directly from Bolivar Street, and a smaller 2-space parking lot with direct access from the alley that I mentioned. There's 2 items that have been incorporated into the PUD plan in order to try to protect the free movement of traffic along the alley, as mentioned, sometimes in an emergency capacity. The first is the parking lot, the 2-space parking lot there with access from the alley is configured so as that the vehicles would not be backing out onto the alley. Rather than having typical pull-in parking off of the alley, which could possibly conflict with that access. And the second part is some additional language that's covered by the bill amendment sheet, and I'd rely on the law department to go through that information. This item was recommended for approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission at their meeting of September 16th. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council may have prior to Ryan going over the additional information contained on the bill amendment sheet.
Any questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Barron. And Mr. Molman, would you go over the amendment sheet number 1?
Sure thing. So bill amendment sheet adds a section 4 to the ordinance dealing with use of the public alleyway known as West Wall Way. This...
I think we have some feedback. If you're on the line, please mute. Thank you.
It's very distracting, hard to talk. Section 4 adds information and some requirements regarding the alleyway known as West Wall Way. And this derived from concerns of the fire department. As Mr. Barron indicated, that alley is used for some emergency services. They're at Fire Station 1. And so what this section tries to accomplish is essentially eliminate the use of West Wall Way for the operations of the business and the residents that will be installed on this site. So essentially, what it's meant to do is to prohibit the business from, directing vendors to park back there to make deliveries, or encouraging customers from parking there where they come in to get their coffee. This language has been worked on and come to agree to between the city staff and the property owner. I believe Mr. Shaperketter is here tonight. And so this is a nice compromise that addresses the fire department's concerns about not having cars blocking or idling in that alleyway, and also giving the property and the business that's located on the property a certain amount of comfort that they're not going to be responsible for people that they really don't have any control over. The idea is to have the restrictions, operational guidelines in this PUD saying you're not going to use this as part of your operations, your regular operations. So the goal is to allow the business as much flexibility as possible and to use the alleyway in a reasonable way, but not to use it in a way that's going to create blockages that could prevent the deployment of emergency services. I believe we have Chief Schofield from the fire if he needs to go into any more on their particular concerns, but we believe this is a good amendment that addresses both the city concerns and the concerns from the property owner. We're confident we'll be good neighbors there.
Thank you, Mr. Molman. Any questions on the amendment? So at this time, I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to speak, or I wonder, would you want to come and start? Maybe we'll welcome Mr. Shaperketter up first. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council people. Jane and I, my wife and I, have Oak Brook Properties. We bought this property from the Housing Authority as a part of a kind of an open bid process where they asked for proposals. We and some others made proposals. Our proposal was accepted, and we're delighted about that. We think this is going to be a great addition to this area. Been a lot of effort already put into this, the River Park area where Big Whiskey is. Now, Jane, I also have the roastery of the coffee business that our daughter and son-in-law have is located right on McCarty Street at 621 West McCarty, in the gray brick building there that we've spent some time and effort to get. I hope you all can hear me.
Yes.
The time and effort to get kind of updated a little bit. The plan here is to move the operations of Three-Story Coffee from that roastery building and the two places that it currently leases into a common location. 3,000 square foot building. We really are excited about this and hope the council will follow up on the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation and approve the request. And I do appreciate working with Ryan and the fire department folks and the other staff, Eric, in getting that language that's represented by the amendment. It was a back and forth, but in the final analysis, it was language that I think is beneficial certainly for the city, but also helpful for us. So I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Schaefer-Petter, for all you, I know you've done other projects within the city and done improvements, and we appreciate that.
Well, we love it here in Jeff City. It's our adopted home, but we love it here and are glad to do that.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here that would like to speak on Bill 2020-34? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing portion, and we will take up 2020-34.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson approving a preliminary PUD plan for property located at 311 Bolivar Street.
And do we have a motion to accept amendment sheet number 1?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? So we will now take up 2020-34 as amended with amendment sheet number 1. Any further discussion or deliberation on the bill?
I just want to say one.
Councilman Graham?
Like Mr. Schaefer-Cutter said, we did go back and forth with a lot of give and take to this. So I'm glad to see that this amendment sheet was put in there and is agreed upon with both parties. There were some late night emails that was exchanged, and glad to see that we were able to work out something together that works for both parties. So thank you, and thank you to city staff as well. So there was a lot of emails that went back and forth. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Graham. Any other comments, deliberation? Roll call, please.
Fitzwater.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Hensley.
Aye.
Hussey.
Aye.
Kimna.
Aye.
Lester.
Aye.
Schreiber. Vogt.
Aye.
Ward.
Aye.
Wiseman.
Aye.
Bill passes. Thank you. Item 6, appointments by the mayor and Mr. Molman.
Thank you. Two separate appointments. First one is our kind of more conventional appointments. Curtis Mankin to the Convention and Visitors Bureau to fill out a partial term that expires December 2022.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes, and we appreciate our citizens who volunteer for those positions. Item B.
The second set of appointments tonight is to the GIS Steering Committee. GIS Steering Committee was a body that was put together in the infancy of putting together the GIS program between the city and the county. Apparently there's some more work that is going to be taken up and improvements to the system, and so they are getting the GIS Steering Committee kind of back in order. The appointments to the GIS Steering Committee before the council tonight are Hank Vogt, Bob Weber, and David Baggy.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you and congratulations to them. And item 7, presentations from staff, consultants, and invited guests. We don't have any. Item 8, announcements by mayor, council, and staff. We have our 4 standing committees, and the complete schedule, our calendar is at jeffersoncitymmo.gov. Do we have any committee announcements this evening? Councilman Hensley?
Thank you. The Finance Committee will meet this Thursday morning at 7:30 a.m., and we're meeting virtually on WebEx. And directions for how to access the meeting are available on the city's calendar.
Thank you. And those virtual meetings are open to the public, and we appreciate you doing it virtual. Any other committee announcements? Okay. Item B, we have the Missouri 2021 Bicentennial Update. Before we get to that, we actually have an announcement for the county bicentennial. Monday, November 19th, there will be a ceremony, I believe at noon, where the Cole County is going to basically turn over their bicentennial over to the state. So as we know, 2020 is Cole County's bicentennial, and then 21 is our state's bicentennial. So there will be a ceremony to make that transition over to the Missouri bicentennial, and Commissioner Sam Bushman is taking the lead on that. I'm sure he will get us more details, but please mark your calendar for November 16th. And my announcements, I wanted to announce that Jefferson City won the United Way Most Creative Hat. So if you saw the hat, the Dr. Seuss hat when you came inside City Hall, and you see those around town, and we have it up on the screen, so if you didn't get to see it, and I do want to thank Jennifer Sakanik, who works in the front office, and she is an assistant for myself and Mr. Kroll, and she does a lot of other duties as assigned. As you can see, she's used her creativity here, and it was really neat that Jefferson City won Most Creative. So next time you get a chance, take a look at it up close. She has a lot of detail on there of all kinds of areas in Jefferson City, and the J.C. Strong there right in the middle. So she has it kind of in the Dr. Seuss style of homes, and I was very impressed with her effort on that and appreciate her letting us really shine as the most creative. So there's still opportunities to support United Way. I know a lot of our team members, including Mr. Smith and several of our city staff, are very active and engaged in taking leadership in United Way. So wanted to recognize Jennifer, and we will have her come to a future council meeting and recognize her in person. Also, wanted to announce that Guns and Hoses they held a preseason hockey match on Saturday, and Team Guns was the winner. So Team Guns is now 2-0 against Team Hoses. So it was a very good game. It was 3-2, and what they did was a virtual game, so they played, but there was no audience. So they had it streamed Facebook Live for the first time, and we hope that they do many more games. So you can go back on the JCMO Guns and Hoses Facebook page and watch the hockey game. It was very exciting, and we are definitely proud of both teams, but that is certainly impressive that Team Guns won their second game. So they will defend their trophy, I believe, in the spring. They'll have another game. But the reason they're actually playing is for safety net. So I encourage anyone who finds it in their heart to want to give to that organization that really helps our police and fire, that they can go on the Facebook page and on the new website that was just activated for JCMO Guns and Hoses. And please feel free to give, because since they couldn't actually have the game this year, I know that it would be very helpful if some of us would be willing to give and donate to that cause. So congratulations, Team Guns. And item 9, Lincoln University Student Representative Update. This is exciting. We do have something to report that we've started our interviews for our next student liaison. And the 2 interviews that we've had so far have both been outstanding, and this is going to be a very difficult decision, but I'm very excited to say that we're getting closer to having our 3rd ever student representative. Item 10, presentations from the gallery on specific bills or resolutions. So individuals are limited to 5 minutes, and we'll have a timer on the screen. And we have a sign-up sheet, so Emily will go through and read the name, and then she'll say who's next, so the person will know who's next. And then after we're completed with presentations, we'll take up Resolution 2020-12. But I do want to ask, is anyone here to speak on any other resolution? We do have one. Which one are you here, Mr. Schaefer-Cutter?
On the permissive use, which is on the consent agenda.
Oh, it's on consent. Okay. Why don't we go ahead and take up consent? That way you don't have to listen through the entire. If you want to leave, you're welcome to. Anyone else here for another bill? Okay. Let's do item 11, consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
Your Honor, I believe Mr. Schaefer-Ketter wanted to speak on the topic before the council took it up.
Okay. To speak on consent agenda? Okay, so.
Well, it's still technically under 10, public comment on specific actions.
Okay. Well, why don't I welcome you to come on up first, Mr. Schaefer-Cutter, and then we'll take up your item, and then we'll move forward. Thank you for being accommodating.
And I apologize for appearing to dominate the podium here. It wasn't my intention to do that. Maybe it's just early yet, right?
Yes.
Again, I'm Jeff Schaefer-Cutter. In addition to the property that you all just discussed and approved, and thank you very much, by the way, for that, Jane and I also have the warden's residence at 700 East Capitol. And on your agenda, on your consent agenda today, and I know the consents usually are anticipated probably not to generate a whole lot of activity, but that permissive use application that is before you carries with it a mural permit that's already been approved by city staff. And I'm opposed to that mural. And let me start, though, before and take some of my time by apologizing. We at one time had a very active Capitol Avenue owners group that met frequently, and that organization no longer meets, and as a result, this issue was not brought before that organization. I think it would have been helpful to the council if it had been. My basic, the thing I want the city council to know is that the process that was followed here really wasn't proper under the city code. This mural that is in your packet is a $3,500 expenditure of public funds, city funds, that should have been brought to the city before it ever got to this point. It wasn't, and in my view, that is probably not proper under the city code. Further, I will say this, the idea of a Cultural Arts Commission making its application and it being approved by a city agency without the input of the council, especially since the city code requires council approval of public fund expenditure for cultural arts programs, is a conflict of interest, frankly. A couple other points. The overlay district that was adopted by the city in 2017, after multiple discussions with owners in the area, was designed to protect the historical legacy of Capitol Avenue. In my view, this mural, whimsical perhaps, maybe even a little bit of a caricature, does nothing to enhance the historical legacy of Capitol Avenue. $3,500 for the mural, not a huge expenditure, you might say. The owner across the street from this mural, Flotron and McIntosh, has a property directly across the street. They spent thousands in multiple of that $3,500 to restore their property to historic plus after the tornado. And Richard, in the interest of time, has authorized me to tell the council that he views that mural as a disrespect to the investment that they have in the property they own there. Frankly, it looks to me like the design here is to create an arts and entertainment district on Capitol Avenue. That's what the mural depicts and kind of markets. And frankly, again, if that's the goal of either the Cultural Arts Commission or the owners there or the city, I'd like to know about it. Because we didn't buy what's called the Marmaduke House because of the cultural arts and entertainment things that are happening in that area. We bought it because of a historic landmark that needed to be preserved. We've done that for 8 years now, hope to continue. But frankly, I want to know whether the city believes that that's a historic district or not. Is it going to be a cultural arts and entertainment district, or is it going to retain its historic nature? I think that's an important question. The permissive use that you're about to approve on the consent agenda, of all things, means that mural is going up. 58 feet long, 6 feet, 8 feet high on a wood slat fence. Marketing, perhaps a maintenance issue without a question. That wood slat fence is already warping as I get down to 16 seconds. I want to know what the city, I'm really looking forward to hearing what the city council has to say about that mural. If that mural were anyplace else in the city, it would have been laughed at. But for some reason, it's sliding right on through on the consent agenda. Bingo. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Schaefer-Cutter. And I believe what we can do is pull that out specifically, even though it's on consent. Council may choose then to pull that out and act on that separate.
Thank you.
And I believe, I don't have a full understanding of exactly some of the answers to the questions, but I believe that the Arts Commission was preferring to enhance the area, not detract from it, but also have a concern. I'm not sure if property owners were not notified or what the notification process is. And I do believe that even though there were some open and public meetings, that perhaps the neighbors may not have either been notified or known about it. So there may be an opportunity for us to revisit that and include more neighbors, because I know that particular property, I believe, was tornado damage, so I think they were looking to do something to enhance the area.
I think all the owners in that area got notice. I filed written comments in opposition to the application because I wasn't able to be at the hearing. I'm not sure if those, frankly, if those comments were considered. It wasn't obvious that they were considered. My complaint really isn't with the hearing process. I think the city went through that. We got notice. We had an opportunity to object. I did. I'm not sure if anybody else did or not.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer.
Thank you.
So, Councilor Molman, would it make sense, since there could be some issue to, what would be the process if that were to be revisited, or what is your suggestion?
The fence is needed, and so there's really kind of two issues here. It's a permissive right of use to have the fence on the city's rights of way. That's a safety issue, just the structure of the fence. Behind the fence, Stip Barony's old property, it's a large drop-off. We think the fence is probably needed for safety issues. However, if the city council wanted to essentially amend what's being requested tonight and say, we approve the fence, but we do not approve the application of a mural to the fence, that would be an appropriate action. Now, the city council can just approve the fence, the permissive right of use, and allow the mural to go up. That's really kind of the issue, is whether or not the mural should be put up or not. And so that's what I see as kind of being the substantive issue before the council. Procedurally, any city council member can ask that an item be pulled off the consent agenda. If you wanted to take it up now, I think that would be appropriate. That would be a motion to amend the agenda again, and to take it up now, just a simple majority vote. Or you can take it up, after the public comments on any other bills and figure out what the council wants to do then. It's really the council's choice whether or not they want to do it now or later.
Okay, thank you. And Councilwoman Ward, as the liaison, do you have any comments?
Actually, I'm not the liaison. Councilman Hussey is, but I do have a couple of questions.
Yes.
One being, that's a temporary fence. Is that accurate? And so when something is developed on that corner, this fence and mural would come down, correct?
From what I understand, the property owner of the fence, Miss Stabarany, essentially it is a temporary fence that is to be there as a safety measure.
Correct.
Until the property is developed. I don't think she has a particular timeline on development of the property, and so it's yes, in nature, a temporary fence, but the extent of that temporariness is still unknown.
Unknown. Okay. All right. Another question being that this is a historic district, and the fact that we have a city code that protects the area through guidelines to protect its historic integrity. Did this mural go through the Historic Preservation Commission? And should it have?
I do think Mr. Barron's going to address the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. One moment as I pull my notes out on this subject. Yes, there is. So murals are regulated by Chapter 3 of the City Code, the Advertising and Signage chapter. There's a process for approving a mural, an administrative staff level process where a property owner can apply for a mural permit, and that goes through an administrative procedure, a hearing. We send out notices to surrounding property owners, very similar to a planning and zoning notice, except the administrative hearing is literally the department director ruling on whether the findings for murals were met and approving the mural permit. Okay. There's not a whole lot of room for content-based review of a mural within that process. It's more of a review to make sure it's not an inappropriate type of painting, and I'd leave Ryan to describe what inappropriate means. But outside of that, it's not really a content-based procedure. Fortunately, in this case, though, the application started with the Cultural Arts Commission, where such types of review can take place. Okay. And then, yes, it did go to the Historic Preservation Commission for review because it is contained within that overlay district, and there's a requirement that it be reviewed by that body in that case. The fence that was put up basically as a direct result of the tornado and the removal, the demolition of those buildings as a safety measure. I don't think at the time it was known that the fence was going on the right-of-way, but the City Building Regulations Division did issue a permit for a temporary fence. That fence would come down upon development of the property, which we knew would be years off, but not a terrible number of years to our understanding. We did conduct a mural hearing where after that hearing, as the testimony was given, there was a review of that, and then a permit is issued for the mural. But it is on the right-of-way, and that is a condition contained within that permit that it receive a permissive use of right-of-way, which is an action that would be undertaken by the City Council. I hope that's a fair review, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Any questions? We have Councilman Fitzwater and then Councilman Graham.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Could you go back through and reiterate what the role of council is then in murals? Is it basically this comes through on a consent agenda and we can say yes or no, or do we have some input into what that mural looks like?
Well, it's a little odd in this regard, and I might have to rely on Ryan very, very quickly here. My understanding is that it's you're ruling on the permissive use of right-of-way with a mural being in it would be an obvious item for your review. If the mural were on private property, you would not have a review. It would be an administrative procedure.
Well, that raises another question then, and maybe this is a different situation, but when we were going through the discussions on the building at 202 High Street, and there was some discussion that as that wall was built, there was going to be provisions for a stucco side that possibly could house a mural at some point. I asked the question of who would have the final right of decision on what that mural looks like. Is that a different situation, or would that go through the same
So my understanding is that is a very specific legal language that was inserted in order to address that very highly visible intersection, which seems appropriate in my mind considering how visible that intersection is, but would rely on Ryan.
All right, the situation over at 200 East Side, really kind of a one-off situation where the right to install a mural on that wall was specifically reserved to the city. And because the city council acts for the city, they would be the decision maker on whether or not to install a mural on that particular piece of property. That's not a particularly good analogy for this situation. That was kind of the result of a settlement agreement on that particular situation.
Well, I just want to clarify the process on that particular building. Thank you.
Councilman Graham and then Councilwoman Ward.
I just had a question about the fence that was put up. Does the city own the fence?
No, it was put up by the private property owner, and as I mentioned, it was issued a permit, with a temporary permit, largely as a safety measure. As Ryan mentioned, the fence is needed. There's a very large drop-off. It's owned by the property owner.
But is the fence still in good condition?
I'm afraid I can't testify as to the condition. I don't know of any issues there.
I was told that there are some issues, but I'll take what you said.
As a piece of private property, it would be subject to our, property maintenance inspections and upkeep. So if there are problems, certainly within the city's discretion to make sure that those are taken care of.
Councilwoman Ward.
Regarding funding, I believe we approved $500 for all of our commissions, and this is $3,500. Is this, and Councilman Hussey may know this, is this coming from the Cultural Arts Foundation, or is this actually city funded? I don't know if you know or a staff person knows.
I can't say with certainty if it was Parks and Rec or the foundation.
The contract for the $3,500 with the artist was executed by Director Spalding, so that tells me that that is Parks and Recreation funding that is within his spending discretion.
Councilman Schreiber. The fence is owned by the property owner, but it's on the city right away, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and so was the property owner a member of the Cultural Arts Commission?
I believe, yes. I do not serve as a liaison to the Cultural Arts Commission, so I don't have a whole lot of room to answer questions on that.
The property owner then was the individual that requested that this be placed on the fence, or was that the Cultural Arts Commission? It seems to me like there might be a conflict of interest somewhere there a little bit.
The property owner did sign, was a participant in the application for the mural in the administrative capacity, going through the administrative hearing. So,
and did that property owner, was that the person that actually signed off on it?
I believe it was. I'm afraid I'd have to check.
Well, I think there's potentially some issues there that we might need to look into a little bit more. So.
I do recall attending this meeting virtually, and I believe the applicant abstained from voting, if that's helpful information.
Councilman Hussey?
I mean, I'll just say, I think there's some issues here. I don't want to get into who made this motion conflict. If there's some work that needs to be done, let's do it. But the Cultural Arts Commission is a group of people who are dedicated to art in this community, and I certainly don't want to have statements made here tonight that sort of imply, something underhanded taking place or a conflict of interest. Now, I look at it to say the item on the agenda is related to the permissive use of just the fence, period. If we need to revisit the mural piece in that process, I think we could do what Councilor Molman said earlier and pass the permissive use, but not maybe restrict the ability to paint that mural and get into this a little bit more. The Cultural Arts Commission is a group of people dedicated to improving, public art in this community and looking for opportunities to do so. That's a commission that spent quite a bit of time working on this, but I certainly think that if we're going to have questions or want to dig into this a bit more, then we owe it to the property owner and the Cultural Arts Commission to make them aware and give them an opportunity to answer questions or speak for themselves as well. So,
I don't know if this is would you like to suggest that, to take it back to them, Councilman Hussey?
Well, I don't know if it's about taking it back to them or this group needs to figure out what it wants to do, but I think we could certainly split this off the consent agenda this evening as a separate item and address it to say that we approve the permissive use of the fence on public rights of way?
Yes, and then I would add the caveat, but reserve permission to install a mural until further action.
And so I guess if that needs to be in the form of some sort of motion at this time, I would make the motion to match what Councilor Moltmann, the city attorney, just offered.
And I would second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and second to pull item B, or to change it according to what Councilman Hussey has noted. Any questions? So we have our motion and second. Any further discussion? Why don't we do a roll call?
Graham,
Aye.
Hensley,
Aye.
Hussey,
Aye.
Kimna,
Aye.
Lester,
Aye.
Schreiber, Vogt,
Aye.
Ward, Wiseman, Fitzwater.
Aye.
All right, motion passes, and that did include A, C, and D, correct, on the consent, right? That was taking up everything but making the change to B? Or you had B separate?
I was pulling B off.
B
I think
separately,
That was
okay.
my intent, was just to pull B separate. And so
Okay.
if you need a motion for the rest of them,
Let's do a motion for A, C, and D on consent.
so moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so A, C, and D are passed on consent, and B has been modified. So we have everything we need, Councilor Molman?
Sounds straight to me.
Okay. Now we will have item 10, presentations from the gallery on specific bills or resolutions. So Mrs. Donaldson has our list. So you're welcome to come to the podium as she reads your name, and she'll say who's next up, and every speaker will have 5 minutes.
I have-
Mrs. Donaldson.
Carl Landwehr is listed first, and Chuck Laymeyer following Mr. Landwehr.
Welcome. Mayor Turgeon, men and women of the council, I want to first tell you how much I appreciate the opportunity to once again appear before you and share my thoughts relevant to this educational marker. I also believe that it's extremely important to thank all the participants in this discussion who have participated with great respect and decorum as we debate the wisdom of this historical marker. It really does boil down to an interpretation of history. I believe, as I said, it's an educational marker. Perhaps some of you have heard my story. As a little boy, I came by this marker on numerous occasions and was intrigued by who was Price, what's it doing here nearly in the middle of the street. And that led me to come to understand the Civil War. And that, of course, to learn more about slavery, a barbaric practice that we, I'm sure, all can agree. This understanding has led me, I should say, did lead me, as a student at the University of Missouri in the early 60s. I was a member of an all-white fraternity, and a young man wanted to be a member of that fraternity who was black. Myself and other brothers were compelled by the importance that this young man could provide to our fraternity and wanted his admittance. I'm very pleased to say that we prevailed, and it was the first time in the history of the University of Missouri that a black student was admitted to a white fraternity. I am equally proud of my point of view then, as I am now, as I stand before you, speaking in favor of leaving this historical marker as is or modified. I believe Mr. Barnes, my friend for many, many years, and his constituents have a different interpretation. And you see, I think, in interpretations, there just doesn't seem to be a right or wrong answer. I will say that Mrs. Coleman and I, although I've not spoken with her, I believe that she and I agree on two important items, two important considerations. And that is the end of racism and prejudice. It is my belief that this educational marker can do for many as it did for me. If I lived during the time of Thomas Hart Benton as he was painting the murals, while many in the community would disagree with me, I would stand for Thomas Hart Benton. He painted what he saw: the lynching, a brothel, a train robbery. I'm a purist in my belief about art and about history. I submit to you, men and women of the council, Mayor Turgeon. In Berlin, in Germany, they're debating the wisdom of restoring parts of the Berlin Wall. Not to contain or restrain people, but at least they not forget what took place when Germany was divided. There's also extensive debate still occurring about Dachau. There are those who are so disturbed by it they want to destroy it, but they did not. At least they remember. I believe the course of action today should be one of deliberate prudence. I'm not compelled by any reasoning I've heard thus far that we need to rush. Let's get it right, for the sake of history. For other little boys and girls who come by a moment in their life and say, "What is that?" they will learn. I will close by giving you a piece of PR history. And I know you're at 5 minutes, so if you could wrap up. I will. The theme of Silver Dollar City. We have a great past ahead of us. Let's don't destroy it. Thank you. Thank you. Any questions? Okay.
Next up is Becky Ambrose and then Bob Priddy.
I think we have Mr. Laymeyer.
I listed him first. I guess he's not here anymore.
Okay. Oh, Mr.
I said Mr. Lawmeyer, right?
No, I said Mr. Landwehr was first. I'm assuming he is not here.
We just had Mr. Landwehr. Did you say Mr. Laymeyer? Chuck
Landwehr, and then Laymeyer. Next
Okay.
up is Becky Ambrose and Bob Priddy.
And we have Mr. Laymeyer here, so we'll have Mr. Laymeyer next, and then we'll have Mr. Ambrose. Thank you.
I would be happy to yield the floor. I'm Chuck Lawmeyer, not Laymeyer, but I live at 6319 Rolling Road. I'll try to speak directly here so you can hear me through these masks. I have trouble hearing some of you, hearing aids. First, I would like to endorse the mayor's Mask Up initiative as I was hearing it. This is a wonderful gesture. I'm an advocate of masks. I consider wearing a mask a civic duty and indeed a patriotic duty. So more power to that effort. This monument, though, is why I come to speak, and I learned of this monument when I was still a teenager. I had an assignment from someone to go visit this monument and find out what it was. Now, when I say I was a teenager, we're talking 65 years ago. So I went out on Morrow Drive and found the monument, and I said, that's fine. Something historic occurred here. I had no opinion about it one way or the other, but I always kind of fondly remembered the monument. And I spoke to Councilman Schreiber the other day and got his opinion on the monument, and at that time I would say I was still rather undecided about my opinion of what should happen to the monument. Since then, I've heard some very eloquent speakers speak in favor of removing this monument, among those being Bob Priddy and Jay Barnes. And Mr. Barnes had several articles in the newspaper. So I've been won over, and I believe this monument should go. And I would make the observation that we white people seem to have a lot of nerve to tell the African American community what they should like or what they should accept. We weren't the ones enslaved, so I would listen to the black community. I visited the monument again about 3 months ago just to see what it was, what it said, and rather poignant was a piece of paper lying there. I don't know who placed it, but it said, was a quote from W.E.B. Du Bois, and it said, the monument is dedicated to the memory of those who fought to preserve slavery. Wonderful. So I think I'll leave it at that, and I would just urge the council to do the right thing and vote to have this monument removed.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. And next,
Becky Ambrose, and then Bob Priddy.
welcome.
Hi, I'm Becky Ambrose, 1001 Fairmont Boulevard, Jefferson City. I live 1 block from the monument and have for 35 years, and we've never had a race problem in our neighborhood in the 35 years we've lived there. So we all get along. We have a very diverse neighborhood, great neighborhood. But I wondered if you all knew that in 2013 we were placed on the National Register of Historic Places, Morrow Drive Historic District. That was done through a lot of work from our neighborhood that begins at Fairmont and Chestnut, Hillcrest, all the way down Fairmont to Morrow Drive, up to Elmerine and Vineyard, and also down and around Fairmont Court. This monument sits in the middle of a National Historic Place on the National Register, and I've never heard anyone address that issue. I'm not sure whether you can just walk in and remove something that is in. We worked hard to become that because we are on documents so people know when they come to Jeff City we have a historic district neighborhood. And there's descriptions written about every property that you can read about. It's very detailed. So number one, I don't know that it can be done without interfering with the National Historic District that we are in. Number two, I have never heard what the plan is to replace it. I have heard the comments about how this monument was moved, but nobody ever said why. The monument used to be, in 1933, if you go up Morrow Drive and around that Greenberry curve, instead, if you went over the hill to the right to Morrow Heights School, the new Morrow Heights School, there's a wide place in the asphalt. That's where the monument stood. In 1955, they built, we call it the new Morrow Heights from 1955, and school buses couldn't get around it. So that's why it was moved several blocks down to that triangle where our street veers into Morrow Drive. Still, you know, Sterling Price, it doesn't say anything about where he stood or anything like that. It's just designating the area, you know, as Jefferson City. They didn't fight. So I wonder, you know, I've heard lots of people bantering, well, we'll replace it with something else. Well, I wonder if this is going to be like the Convention and Visitor Bureau or the Convention Center in Jefferson City. Once you tear it down, how long is it going to be before we do anything? And by then it will be forgotten. And at least now when people say, is there any history about the Civil War in Jefferson City? You can say, yes, go read that monument. We had a battle that never happened. And Sam Bushman wrote a great research article in Sunday's paper about the details of the battle that never happened. I think it's a shame to tear it down. You know, we've offered to have it redone. I'm not sure. I think you better check first whether you can go into a National Historic Register place and tear down a monument. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bob Priddy, and then Pete Edding.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I've been conflicted since the meeting of the Public Works Committee a few days ago about what to say tonight, and there are several things I want to say, so I'm going to hustle right through them, because at the end I want to talk about why it's important because of something that happened at that committee meeting that left me very, very angry. For the first full council, let me first recap a couple of the things I said at the meeting. We have talked about some of the philosophical arguments for removing this monument, but the arguments that I think that are most compelling are the words of the people who speak from life experience in dealing with this, and the words that they use to describe this marker. You might have heard them: painful, fearful, disruptful, hurtful, a symbol of hate, among other words that you probably heard at that meeting. These are people who have lived their lives under the shadow that this marker casts over part of our city and over them. I don't think I emphasized this enough when I spoke to the committee the other night, but I hope this city council will not tell those members of our community family that this is something they should just ignore. It's not really that important. Just get beyond it. Don't think about it. Clearly, this is not going to work. It's not a serious problem. It is a serious problem, and I'll get back to that later. For those who say installing a second sign here, a second educational sign, that would tell more about the Price siege, that would solve absolutely nothing. And I'd be interested to know what the proponents of this idea would say on that sign. Because if you're going to say more about the battle and what it did or didn't do, then there's no reason to have the first sign there to begin with. Until the Public Works Committee meeting, I was thinking that we might be able to turn the negative into a positive by taking this rock and this sign out to the Wallendorf house and using that as a marker with a new plaque on it to designate this house, which now has no sign at all that tells anybody why it's there and what it's all about, but it's in that house that General Price surrendered any thoughts of capturing Jefferson City and taking it back to the South with him. So that would stand the UDC's idea on its head, but I don't believe that anymore. As far as marking other sites, there are groups of community leaders from several organizations, including the historic city of Jefferson, who are now discussing establishing a series of historic markers throughout our town that tell our story, far beyond what this one does. And I hope this city and this council will support those ideas when the time comes. The Mellon Foundation is pledging $250 million nationally for the next 5 years to provide markers of this kind. Perhaps this would be something that would help fund that effort. But getting back to the present marker, my anger about this marker and what happened at that committee meeting has only grown. I no longer believe in relocating this thing out to the Wallendorf house, not after I heard Jackie Coleman read a letter at the committee meeting, a brutal, vicious letter written by a gutless bigot who did not sign his name. He used the word nigger 13 times. He called her a nigger in this letter. He finished up by saying, "I don't belong to the KKK, but you're an example for why it should exist." Painful, hurtful, fearful words, and all the other words. It wasn't signed. Bigotry and cowardice and anonymity sleep together. The discussion of what to do with this marker and comments by Jackie and others about how this presence has affected their lives has led to an exposure and an example of the worst that we can be in our town. And I don't believe this coward represents our city, but he has graphically shown that there is a very ugly side to this discussion, and in showing it has shown why this marker should be removed. Symbols have meaning, as has been said before, and our city should not actively or passively endorse a marker on public property that can engender this kind of hateful comment aimed at a particular individual or a particular group of individuals. I don't think I can describe to you how angry I became after that committee meeting the other night, and how I feel about that letter and what it says about my town and your town. That is why I support removing this marker, because it not only stands for an unwelcome past, but it stands for an ugliness that is present slightly beneath the surface, and I hope it's only a very small part of our city. Removing the marker is not just a mechanical act. It will be a statement that hatreds of another time will not be tolerated today in our town. Not today, and not ever. So I ask you to please give strong support to this resolution. I'll answer any questions anybody has.
Any questions? Thank you.
Next up is Pete Edding, and then Thomas Mott.
Welcome.
Hello, Madam Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of the City Council. I'm Pete Edding from Jeff City, Missouri. First, I'd like to mention a story about the Ottoman Empire, present-day Iraq. A cemetery was destroyed containing the graves of British soldiers that fought there in the First World War by ISIS. Now I'd like to go to Cuba, Havana, the Havana Harbor. In Havana today, there is still a monument to USS Maine that blew up in Havana Harbor in 1898. That monument is still there. Then I'd like to take you to November 4th, 1863, Vicksburg, Mississippi. In Vicksburg, Mississippi, there was a shared monument for both Union and Confederate soldiers. And across the United States, there are both shared monuments in the United States for Union, Confederate, Indian, white settler, or settlers. It amazes me that we are becoming less tolerant than a communist regime and going to like ISIS, turning to that mentality. For a young man who is disheartened and saddened by the monument and the street's name in Jeff City, maybe he shouldn't try to align himself with activists, lobbyists, warrior lawyers, or politicians. Why doesn't he do something like join a police department, pin on a badge? Or how about becoming a United States Marine, an infantryman? Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thomas Mott, and then Vic Rackers.
Yes, I appreciate the opportunity to address the council and the mayor. History's not pretty in a lot of ways. Civil War, at least my knowledge of the Civil War, what I have studied, was not solely about slavery. About 1% of the participants fighting for the CSA were slave owners, about 1%. 3 top states for Civil War battles, number 1 was Virginia, number 2 was Tennessee, and number 3 was Missouri. We had some bloody fighting in this state. I look back just a few years ago, and I have a lot of respect for Elliot Davis in St. Louis, Channel 2, Fox News. I've met him not recently, but I've met him in the past, talked to him a few times. Just a few years ago, the inept mayor of St. Louis thought it'd be a good idea to take down the Confederate monument in Forest Park. Very tall structure, very beautiful structure. I used to ride my bike by there. Used to look at it all the time. Well, Creason, the mayor, thought it'd be a good thing for the city of St. Louis. It would help it heal. So she decided to get it removed, and the council of St. Louis approved it. I believe it's being stored now for thousands of dollars a year at Jefferson Barracks. But Elliot Davis spoke out about this quite often, how wrong it was. And look what's happened to St. Louis. I don't think it's helped any. And throughout the country, there's been an assault on history. And even Lincoln's monument has been defaced and attacked. So, right behind you is Thomas Jefferson. He's been attacked at the University of Missouri to be removed. So where does this madness stop? I ask you to keep the monument in place. History's not pretty, but keep it in place. So when you give in to this madness, what is next? Changing the name of Jefferson City? And what's next after that? The law enforcement, the fallen law enforcement people? Take that down? You know, where does this madness end? And you look back, and my father fought the Nazis, got a Bronze Star in the Battle of the Bulge. But when Hitler took power in the 30s in Germany, he and the Nazis removed a lot of history, a lot of Jewish history, a lot of things. So I hate to see us do this. And I beg of you to not remove this monument, but keep it in place, because history is not pretty. Look at the massacres that were done to the American Indians. I mean, there's a lot of things in our history that are not good, you know, and we're not proud of, but it's history. And I'm just really distraught what's going on in our country taking these monuments down. And it's just a terrible thing. And, you know, you learn from history. But I just don't know where this madness. So if you give in, please make a stand. And if you do vote to keep it, I don't think it's you're being a racist. I mean, that word is used way too easy today. I mean, everything somebody is, something like this, oh, you're a racist. No, that word is used way too easy. And, the Civil War was a terrible thing for this country, but it's part of our history. So I appreciate your time, but please think if you vote to remove this, what is next? Jefferson City? Changing the name? Thank you.
Thank you.
Vic Rackers and then Steve Happy.
Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I echoes sort of his comments also about what is next, but I believe we should have had the plaque or the wording here tonight so we could refer to it. So, most people, I can't recite it, but that's a little bit different than what I had to say. I just believe it is a bad decision to remove a benign, what I consider to be a benign informational plaque, which is part of our history. I believe it sets a bad precedent and will not appease the removal revisionist opposition. And as he said, what is next? You don't have to agree with history, but history is what it is. So, I just would encourage you to leave our history as is, and it's an example of what happened. And I don't really understand the opposition or see what's extremely offensive about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve Happy and then Jan Schumacher.
Welcome.
Mayor, City Council, I'm going to pull this down for just a second. There. I read a sign on the way into Jeff City, belongs to Central Bank. Words on it are very clear. When we say strong roots, we mean it. That goes back to the history. They've been here for a long time and they're playing on it. Well for them. I'll be quite clear that I am in favor of the monument staying there. I remember when it was out, farther out, by where now Morrow Heights School is. I played on it then when I was younger. Then I went down on Morrow Drive. I played on it then when I lived on El Marine. I don't see moving it how it's going to change anything. The blacks and the whites always have a little differences. I have very many, I shouldn't say many, I have quite a few good black friends. My first black friend was I was in 8th grade up through 8th grade at IC Church until he went on to another school. That was my best friend. My wife's sister was the first white woman to graduate from Lincoln University, which I also attended. If we work at it to try and get along, we can all get along. That monument doesn't mean a whole lot of things. It does not honor Sterling Price, which I might add is my great-great-grandfather. And I can't say that I'm proud. I've read bits and pieces about him, but it never meant a whole lot to me. My grandmother did, but we need to think about what we're doing. I think the monument should stay right where it is. It isn't hurting anything, and the people, we need to put all this behind us and try and get along with one another. That monument moving isn't going to do that. That's just going to draw up ill will and a lot of other things. See if I had it. As for Well, I won't go into all that, but it amounts to the same thing. We need to try and get along and leave the monument alone right where it sits. It's been there for a long time. It doesn't say anything about, like I said, honoring him. It just states a fact. And there was an article in the newspaper written by, I believe, Nicole Thompson. She said it was a lie, that he said when it was beautiful, that he wouldn't attack the town. My grandmother and mother told me years and years and years ago that was the reason why he didn't want to attack and destroy Jeff City. The homes that you could see from the southern part were Nick Monaco's house, the one on the large house on Greenberry Road where he stayed in the basement of, and a few other ones. All the wooden ones are gone, but those are still standing. We ought to have some part of history left. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jan Schumacher, then Jay Barnes.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I have been in correspondence with you, but I also wanted to make a couple of follow-up comments to remarks from this evening. A couple of points in specifically is concern about revising history and changing history. The ironic part of that is that the UDC, the Daughters of the Confederacy, actually did that. Their intent was to rewrite history to favor the Confederacy and to support white supremacy. That's clear in their documents. It's been well documented. So I think they already did revisionists. We're just fixing that problem. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then these comments of what has been done in Germany and other places, and I just wanted to reference that. I had the solemn occasion to visit Dachau a number of years ago when we were in Germany on a vacation. It's a dreadful place. It was just horrendous. But you didn't see any, you didn't see Hitler, you didn't see any of the German leaders being glorified. You saw the result of what had happened. And then we also, that happened to be the same year when I was in Germany when the Berlin Wall had come down that previous November. So we got to see, actually got some pieces of the wall ourselves. So I've seen that experience as well. But they're not putting up symbols of communism or communist leaders if they're wanting to recreate the wall or a portion of the wall for history. So I think you have to see who are you glorifying, what are you showing. I think showing the sad aspects and the reality of it is one thing, but to glorify those that lost or those that were the perpetrators of evil is not acceptable. And the other thing that I hear a lot is, what's next? You know, it's a slippery slope. Well, the fact is, what makes this unique compared to the name of the city or other such things is this was put up to promote white supremacy. That's what the UDC did, and that's why this is hurtful to black Americans and black residents in our community. And I think it's, for us as white people to say it's not racist really doesn't, is a one-sided position because we don't have the same backgrounds to be able to really assess how it affects us. So I just wanted to kind of clarify those. Obviously, I'm in favor of removal of this, and I think it will bring healing because we are taking a stand against racism. And also, as he had said about the letter to Jackie Coleman, which literally made me sick to my stomach. She's my neighbor, and I was just horrified that someone could write a letter like that to her and other black people in the community. So clearly there is racism here, and we need to do what we can to fight against it. So I'd appreciate it. Vote in favor of the resolution.
Thank you.
Jay Barnes, and then Mark Kiekefer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Jay Barnes, 715 Swiss Highway. I want to say three things. First is the slippery slope and the straw man are rhetorically illegitimate kissing cousins. I've heard a lot of slippery slope and straw man arguments today and throughout this from the opposition. We want to talk about what we're really talking about, which is this rock and not other things. The second thing is what everyone here agrees upon. There is no one here who wants to erase history. What we've proposed to the City Council is not just to remove this rock. but to replace it with 3, 4, or 5 markers celebrating our city's true history of the Civil War. When Mr. Edding says that we're erasing history, we've actually proposed to quadruple the number of Civil War markers in the city. I don't think anyone in the opposition has taken account of that fact. And I would hope that the folks who are opposed to removing this marker, if they're serious about wanting to respect history and not erase it, that they will work to put up new markers that tell a true history of our community in the Civil War. And I agree with the previous comment about, is this going to be like a Convention and Visitors Bureau? If you take it down, are we going to wait 20 years? I certainly hope not. I don't think we should be waiting that long at all. And then finally, I want to talk about false equivalencies and some of these things that I've heard tonight. Thomas Hart Benton did not paint the mural in the House Lounge because he sympathized with the lynchers. The return of sections of the Berlin Wall are not being put up by neo-communists in Berlin. And the gas chambers at Dachau are not preserved because of Germans who claim, like the UDC did, that they need to preserve the memory of the Third Reich because the Third Reich was right and should never die. I heard some skepticism, or I sensed some skepticism when Ms. Schumacher said that the UDC's purpose was to rewrite the history of the Civil War. This is not something that's debatable. It's in the founding documents of the United Daughters of the Confederacy. It's in the documents of the United Daughters of the Confederacy here. And it is clownish for people to pretend that that rock was put up for a historically accurate purpose. Get over yourself. You can't go back and rewrite what the UDC wanted to do in 1933. They were very open about their motives. They put it in writing. They had members and cross-membership in the Klan. Does that make everyone who wants to preserve history a racist? No! Heavens no! But does it mean that the city probably ought to look twice at this gift that it got in 1933 when the UDC had power in this community, and so did the Klan when the Klan had a sheriff in this community? I think the city ought to say, you know what, the year is 2020, it's not 1933 anymore. And we should all celebrate history, our true history. Put up more markers. Celebrate the Iatan. If the UDC marker was what the city wanted to celebrate, why isn't Sterling Price on the city seal? Why is the Iatan on the city seal? The Iatan's on the city seal because this was a union city. Nobody's proposing to take it off that seal. No one's proposing to take Thomas Jefferson away. No one's proposing any of this nonsense about what is next. Nothing is next. To my knowledge, the UDC didn't put up any other markers in this community. The arc of justice is long, but it bends towards justice. I've mangled that quote because I didn't look it up before I got up here. Tearing down that marker is not going to solve all the world's problems, but it just might be a cathartic moment for our community to reject the hatred that was present in the group that put it up 77 years ago. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Mark Keycaver and then Dick Dalton.
I'm Mark Keycaver, the pastor of Living Hope Church, and this is my wife, Nina. We are soon to be the residents at 411 East Ashley Street. I would like to remind the council of another bit of writing in public space, which is in the Capitol Rotunda, where the first half of Proverbs 14:34 is engraved, "Righteousness exalts a nation." I think that also applies to a city. They didn't have room to put the second half of the verse, but sin is a disgrace to any people. We are in favor of the removal of the marker. We believe it is a disgrace because it highlights the oppression. It highlights the lack of respect for justice and human dignity that the UDC promoted. And so I would say that we have an opportunity as a city to get it right. The quote that Jay Barnes was referring to was spoken by Martin Luther King on March 31st, 1968 at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. And I believe it goes, "The arc of history is long, but it bends toward justice." And I believe this is an opportunity for our city to get it right. If we don't get it right, eventually it will be gotten right. It's 87 years since the monument was erected. It's 156 years since the events commemorated took place. And we have an opportunity at this moment to exalt righteousness and be done with the disgrace that has hurt our community for that long. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dick Dalton and then Nimrod Chapel.
Mayor, council members, attendees. Jay may not want me to apologize for him, but I'm going to. We each are entitled to our beliefs, and for us, they're valid. And we don't have any particular business calling someone else's belief nonsense. So I think you're entitled to your belief, whoever you are. And I guess I should say Jay's entitled to his belief that it's nonsense. But I think you get my point. A few things. First, I'd like to do a little role play with my granddaughter, a second grade. We're walking by the monument. What's that, Grandpa? Oh, it's a plaque. It's a plaque. What does it say? Well, it's telling about. We used. You know what the Civil War is? Yeah, a little bit. Why is the monument there? Well, now, I'm not going to try to go through all of that conversation, but we're living in a time that's different than when several of you lived and grew up and walked by that monument and what it might have meant to you then. And our kids are seeing different things than we saw when we were young people going by there. And they're asking different questions. I'd like for you to consider what's going on in their world today and how they're going to view things like that monument. And why did you leave it there? Things like that. Number two, I got a letter in the mail. It was addressed to me. I think you know a word that ends in whole and starts with A. That's the way it started. And yes, I too was called the N-word. I didn't count them. Could have been the same as Jackie's, I don't know. Maybe it was because I wrote letters to the editor. Or maybe they heard me here give a few words at the last council meeting. The letter wasn't personally troubling to me because I know whoever wrote the letter has their own personal problems. And they were expressing the problems in their world. It was not a problem in my world. The problem was in their world. And that leads me to why I decided to put my name up tonight. It's because a gentleman a little bit earlier made a statement to this effect. Removing the monument is going to cause ill will. And when that was said, there was a murmur of, First time I've heard any kind of comment from the audience. And that concerned me. if we're talking about, okay, leave it and get over it, it sounds to me like if it's removed, some people are not going to get over it very easily. And that concerns me. It's not going to be a win-win situation either way. Tough decision. Probably you've already decided how you're going to vote. But for you listening, if you're wanting the monument to stay, I think you need to also be able to say, well, if I want those people to get over it when it stays, maybe I need to think about getting over it if it's removed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Nimrod Chapel and then Karen Lydens.
Welcome.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. I'm Nimrod Chappell, president of the Missouri State Conference of the NAACP, president of the Jefferson City branch for about a decade now. You know, I've had the pleasure of living in this community, and I'm raising my kids here. And I was hesitant about speaking, and I'll tell you why. Because it seems like at a point you can say things and end up saying too much. And I'm going to close with that. But let me just bring up another point. You may look here in the audience and notice a dearth of brown faces. I talked to a lot of people before we came, and I talked to a lot of people about this monument and why I'm concerned about it, and they related their concerns about their kids, about their experiences in this community, and about wanting something to change. But you know, one thing that hasn't changed is that there is still a fear. And it's not the fear of public speaking, making your voice heard. It's the fear of retribution. What happens in your community when you take a stand for what you believe to be morally right? And let's just pretend for a second that this isn't about morality. This is about self-preservation for a whole group of people. We heard about some folks who received letters. That shouldn't happen in our community. Not because you addressed the city council. There was no profane language used. There was no hate that was spread. But that's our community. And I tell you what, people here recognize that. There was the comment, Professor Dalton referred to it, about this is just going to stir up stuff. Well, let me tell you what, the stuff has already been stirred up. And it's been that way for a long time, and it's not about to go away. At the beginning of the summer, we had a few thousand people that were protesting, demonstrating. It's not really a protest, just a little demonstration, talking about the things that need to change in community. Well, this is one of the things that needs to change in this community. We got to find a way. We have got to find a way to be able to get along. Part of that is not having a debate on who's human and who's not. Who shall have dignity and who will be respected and who won't. That rock says very plainly that if you're black, if you're brown, you don't belong here. This is a place for other people where they make decisions that affect your lives, control who you are and who you will not be allowed to be. Can sometimes even erase your life. Those are other protests that are going on around the country. As a city council, you're stewards of this community, not just of our tax money, but must set the tone. We've been looking for that on many levels, whether it's the state or the nation, but certainly here in Jefferson City. You're going to make a decision. I hope you make it today, because we can keep coming back. I don't mind. I like coming here and being here with you. It gives me an opportunity to look at my elected officials and talk about important issues. I have to do that as president of the NAACP, so in essence, you're helping me do my job. But I don't think that we can continue to debate whether or not that marker dedicated to the Confederacy is or is not a relic of racist dogma, or that it even has a place in this community, any more than we can debate the very existence of a human being. This is not just a vote on whether or not it will be removed. This is a vote on who each of you are as individuals, as much as it is as our community. Now, if you believe that standing up and standing with those who erected that rock in 33 is the right thing, that might be a personal choice. But I want you to think larger about the implications for this community and the generations to come. Jefferson City ought not be a place where you can't use your First Amendment right to free speech without the threat of being called the most derogatory, racially inflammatory term known in this country. It can't be that way for me. It can't be that way for our seniors. And it sure can't be that way for our next generation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Karen Lydens, and then I'll check the phone to see if anyone's wanting to speak.
Thanks. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to take this off so I can talk up here. I'm not close to anyone. I just want to kind of speak from my heart a little bit tonight. And, I went to Thorpe Gordon here in Jefferson City. I went to Lincoln University. I have had black friends since I moved here. I have a African-American goddaughter who is like a daughter to me. Things are not always as it seems. I think that is how I opened last time I was here. I think we've heard from eloquent speakers, and I appreciate everyone's opinion. I really do. My motto, my car says love to you on my license plate. However, this is about a bigger picture, as we've heard before, about removing history that will not be passed on to my goddaughters and to other children it's not always what it seems. And to remove this rock is to destroy history, contrary to the opposition that claims it's an anti-historical rock. That's what destroys. Instead of rewriting history to fit a political narrative, history should be kept to pass on to subsequent generations. If this historical marker was not there, we would not be having this conversation and bringing to light our beautiful city's history. It's also causing us to pass this fact on, that there was not an attack on Jefferson City, which again, I will say again, that's a miracle. It's a miracle that this city was not attacked. Do we not want that kept in our history, that this city was not attacked? It's not really even about the person. People can say all they want, that's glorifying a person. All it says is that General Price did not attack Jefferson City, and consequently sparing the lives of our city and the city's annihilation. And I just think much of us are better informed because of this and because the marker's there, and if it's gone, there's going to be no reason to pass, or no marker there to keep us talking. And I do myself, I want racism healed. But I want y'all to know there's a deeper issue here. It's deeper than racism. It's called division. And division is the spirit that's trying to get in Jefferson City. It really is. And this whole thing, we want it to bring us closer, not to bring more division. I love all races. And I am just here to say what I said last time. It guises itself as racism. But it's really a spirit of division. So I don't want to forget, like the Holocaust, like they're removing history in other nations. I don't want to forget that. And I don't want to forget the Civil War. And I went to Lincoln University. And as we know, our university is named after that. And they always say there's nothing behind this. But if I've been at the Capitol praying now for 15 years, I ran for state representative. There's always an agenda behind it when something starts like this. Don't kid yourselves. There's an agenda, especially when someone says there's not. There's an agenda. And the next thing you know, we'll be in here trying to remove other things or change other things. So I just want, again, to just say a prayer. Father, today we repent again, tonight, for pride, fear, and racism, and for division. And we forgive the evil that's been done in Jefferson City and on this land of all division, hatred, and racism. And we choose to walk in love and unity. That's all I have to say. Amen.
Thank you.
Michael Brownstein had called that he would be calling in, and he may want to speak, so if we could just check the phone. Mr. Brownstein? That's all I have for those that have signed up. If there's anyone else on the phone that wants to speak, if you could speak up.
Okay. Hearing none, I believe.
Are you able to hear me?
Oh. Hello?
This is Michael Brownstein.
Oh, thank you. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Thank you for letting me talk. I was at the Planning Commission meeting also, and I was also taken back by that nasty letter. But I was more taken back when I started talking to other people who had received that letter. And that kind of division really bothered me. I started my planning speech differently. I spoke about why the statue never should have been there to begin with. And I quoted Robert E. Lee, who on 2 occasions, both times in letters, wrote that the Confederacy lost the war. We should not make any monuments to them because we want to unify the country now. And by making monuments to the Confederacy, we're keeping the country divided. And that's what's happening now in 2020 across the country and in Jefferson City. Furthermore, I read a quote by Lynn Cheney, Dr. Lynn Cheney. That's Dick Cheney's wife. She was a former vice president, most of you know. I'm going to read her quote to you right now. She said, "These men were traitors." Now the question was, should we take the Confederate statues down? And she said, "These men were traitors. It makes sense that they should not be honored in the national landscape." Now, I did a lot of history studying on the general. I was frankly appalled. This man was not a nice person. And even to put his name on a plaque in a town anywhere honors somebody who I felt was very, very evil. He allowed his men to loot. There's evidence that they were allowed to rape. They robbed and stole from Southerners who were on the Confederacy side, as much as the Union side. He didn't seem to know how to keep his men in line. He was just pitiful. He gave the Union a chance to fortify the Capitol because he was too lazy to ride a horse. And because he drove in what they call an ambulance, that slowed everybody down, and by the time they got near us, this town, the Union had pretty much fortified it. But there's a falsity here. They did attack towns nearby. They did a lot of damage to towns nearby. Taos were wiped out pretty much. It was pretty much tore up really terribly bad. And Taos is real close to Jeff City, and that's not a bad-looking town. This man did not think about the beauty of this town. He did not save it because he thought it was beautiful. He took the stance that he might get whipped again, because all along the way, he was losing men. Battle after battle, the Union was taking him down. I don't think he had enough guts to go forward and to fight with us. But I don't want to talk about the history because everybody in the council knows the history of this gentleman.
You can complete your sentence.
You can complete,
yes.
Okay. I believe the statue should come down to kill the cancer of racism in this town. And that's what I stand for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and we have amended the agenda to allow to go ahead and take up Resolution 2020-12 now, so that with respect to everybody who's here, That way they won't have to go through the rest of the agenda. So we are going to go ahead and take that up now. So
Do you
Mrs.
have a picture of the
Donaldson.
monument you could put up? I mean, I've seen it, but do you have a picture of the monument you could put up?
The question has been asked if there's a picture. I don't think there is one. I don't think there's one as part of the, part of the presentation. So Mrs. Donaldson, would you read the resolution, please?
A resolution authorizing the city to remove the UDC marker located at the intersection of Morrow and Fairmont.
Mr. Molman?
Thank you. The title covers that this resolution will authorize city staff to remove the UDC marker located at the city-owned right-of-way at the intersection of Morrow Drive and Fairmont Boulevard. Also directs that the monument or the marker be removed in its entirety and stored at a city-owned facility.
Any council questions, discussion, or a motion to approve? Councilman Fitzwater? Or, I think y'all both had your hands up at the same time, so I'm not sure who is first. Councilwoman Ward?
I just wanted to make a motion to amend an editing portion of the resolution. In the very bottom, now therefore, Fairmont is referred to as Avenue, and it should be Boulevard, like it is up in the earlier text. So I'd like to make a motion to amend that grammatical edit.
Second.
Okay.
The motion is well-founded, but that would be corrected as a Scrivener's error. So while the motion can be discussed and voted upon, it would be corrected as a Scrivener's error.
It was brought up in two previous council meetings, committee meetings, and I believe it hasn't been changed. So that's why I was just putting it on record that that needs to be changed.
Okay, we have it on record to change, so you're saying we don't need an actual motion, though, but you'll make sure.
I don't believe so. That can be corrected as a Scrivener's error.
Okay. Any other, and then Councilman Fitzwater.
Yes, I appreciate all the comments tonight. I do have an amendment that I'd at least like to discuss and present to the council. So I've got copies. I will send them down, and then I'd like to speak to it. I'll give it just a minute. I truly do appreciate everybody that has come in. This is, I don't know, meeting 4 or 5, and we've heard a lot of great testimony, and I appreciate folks on both sides of this issue. It's been said tonight that there's two ways to go. We can either approve or disapprove, and I think there continues to be a third way, which is, can we find ground in the middle where we can all come together and try to get a win for both sides? So I've come up with a motion, we talked about it at committee meeting, that essentially strikes some language in the resolution, and it does correct the issue in regard to Boulevard. But again, it talks about putting up a second marker storyboard approved by and added at the adjacent location by City Council of the City of Jefferson to contextualize the UDC marker. And my comments are, and I have said this repeatedly in other forums, and hopefully that has gotten through, I am in no way defending what the United Daughters of the Confederacy stood for. I mean, I think it's reprehensible, the letter that Mrs. Coleman received. Mr. Dalton, I was not aware of his letter. So I think some of the activities, I was not here when that marker was placed. I can assure you if the marker was presented to us tonight as City Council, I mean, it would go down, I'm guessing, 10-0. But we're not presented with The marker is already in place, and what we're trying to do is figure out as a community how we're going to address that situation. I've received letters, we've all received letters and comments, we've talked to people on both sides of the issue, and I've received them from people that I respect on both sides of the issue, people that I've known since I've been in this community. Some surprised me. I mean, we had some testimony at Public Works from a couple individuals that supported leaving it there with the context of let's talk about it and use it as an opportunity to teach. So I've had some surprises along the way also. And again, I do not condone what the daughters stood for, but I think we can use it as an opportunity to educate. And again, I mean, I think with council having the final say on what those additional storyboards are, we can use it, and if it's a series of, if there are going to be 4 or 5 other markers, I mean, I think that is incredible for our community. I think the one thing we cannot deny is that we have had a spirited debate in this community, and one thing, and I think Mr. Chappell indicated, for the most part in this community, we can do it as adults and we can have a discussion. I mean, there was a meeting, I guess a forum last week that Mr. Chappell was involved with, and former Sheriff White and other individuals talking about some other important issues in our community and mental health issues with our children. And there were a number of things laid out. I did not attend the forum online, but I did read as much as I could, and I thought the newspaper did a great job of reporting on that. And I think there are issues within there that we can all sit down and say, yeah, that needs to be fixed in our community. But the thing that struck me about that process was it was a group of individuals coming together, and I realized they did not have maybe a marker issue on the table, but they had critical issues on the table. Everybody laid their cards out, and it was, my impression, well received. And like I said, I looked through it and said, and they raised some really good issues, and we can sit down as a community and talk about those issues. We have always been successful in this community when we talk about things. And I think this middle ground, each side gives up a little bit, but the important thing is that we give the community an opportunity to continue the dialogue. I mean, people that are called horrible names, I can't account for. That's not the way I grew up. I grew up in the north, and I remember my mother talking and repeating stories from my grandmother about the Underground Railroad being in our community. I mean, we celebrated the fact that, we were helping to eliminate slavery. We had 2 members of Congress in the mid-1800s that were very active in trying to eliminate. So my history, and even though I've been called some names, other people get called names also, it does not relate to the history that I've had and want to project. So again, I'll say in my final closing that I do not support, and I do not think it is accurate to label individuals that are opposed strictly to moving the monument as automatically supporting the other side. I think it's reprehensible, the types of things that organization was doing. Whether, I asked the sole surviving member of the Winnie Davis chapter at the last meeting, had they renounced it. I have not gone back to check. She did not answer the question, but I find it hard to believe that there are members of that group that support that today, but I can't account for what they thought in the mid-1900s and certainly the mid-1800s. But I think this amendment gives us an opportunity to bring some healing to the community, allow us to address this very serious issue, put some education out, and all walk away feeling that we've had an impact on this very critical issue. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments?
So-
Councilman Lester?
So I admire Representative Councilman Fitzwater's effort to achieve a win-win by placing another plaque or some context with the marker to tell an historically more accurate story. But it's been 87 years that we've had this one uncontested, though misleading narrative. And the proposal is to add some context, and somehow that will make things right. And I just don't see that as a win-win. I do think the marker represents an important part of history that should never be forgotten. We need to remember how, after so much sacrifice to preserve the Union and end slavery, nevertheless, white supremacy and racism became entrenched in the fabric of the nation. This marker is part of that ugly historical story. After its removal, I think the marker needs to be placed within that context, perhaps in a museum so its history is appropriately understood and not ever repeated.
Thank you, Councilman Lester, and I should also back up to Councilman Fitzwater's proposed amendment to see if there's any interest in moving that forward. So,
Yeah, I
Councilman
did offer it
Fitzwater.
as a motion, so, yeah, you're
So we have
correct.
a motion. Do
So-
we have a second?
Mayor, as a just a point of procedure, so there needs to be a motion to take up the resolution, or the original resolution, and then there can be amendments, or sorry, motions to amend that resolution.
Okay.
So
we'll start with
first, there
the-
needs to be a motion to take up the original
Thank you for keeping
resolution.
us on track. And is there a motion to approve the original resolution?
I move to approve the original
Second.
resolution.
We have a motion and second, so we've been in our discussion phase, and we have a motion for this amendment that Councilman Fitzwater has put before us. So we have a motion. Is there a second for the amendment? We have a motion and second. So further discussion on the potential amendment. Councilman Schreiber.
I agree with what's been said about individuals who I label as cowards and who are despicable because they won't even sign their name to letters that they send to individuals. And that's exactly what they are. But when you look back at history, I had two great-grandfathers that were labeled as traitors. And they were labeled as traitors because they served in the American Revolution. And they were traitors to England, as were our founding fathers. They were labeled as having committed treason against the mother country of England. We label those that fought for the South as traitors, but we must not forget that they too were Americans, just like we are today. And although it's a wonderful thing that our Union was preserved, here again we cannot forget some things in history. I'm a firm believer that we do need more markers and monuments in the city of Jefferson. I conduct many tours around the town, bus tours that come in here, and I take them around to various locations within our city and point out various things. One of the things that I point out is not only the Monaco home, which I remember as a young man, way before Mr. Monaco was there. I had a good friend whose dad was a minister, and they rented that house. But I stop at the marker. It's not a monument, it's a marker on Morrow Drive. I remember that as a young man when I walked from the old Morrow Heights to the new Morrow Heights in 1955. when we made that. We stopped at McClung Park, had a sack lunch, went on to the new school. My father, being an American history teacher and a teacher of sociology, he first told me about that marker and what it stood for. He told me how despicable and how horrible slavery was. I haven't forgotten the lessons my father told me. The lessons that he told me about the Civil War and the lessons that he told me about World War II. And my father was a disabled naval veteran. I had 4 great-grandfathers that served in the Civil War. And one of those, my great-grandfather, John Thomas Gibney, was an Irishman. And believe me, the Irish were discriminated against, not only by England, but they were discriminated against terribly in this country. Read the book, The Irish in America, and you will see that. But those people moved on and they prevailed. In the late 1960s, while I attended Lincoln University as a double major in speech and art, I had a wonderful professor named James D. Parks, and he was a professor of art, not to be confused with Professor Arnold Parks. I remember that Mr. Parks was the first person that told me about George Caleb Bingham, the famous Missouri artist who was born in Virginia, who was an artist, a writer, a statesman, and a fighter. He lived in Franklin, Missouri, and Arrow Rock, and Kansas City, and Jefferson City. He was very pro-union at the time of the Civil War. He was our state treasurer, appointed in 1861, and later was adjutant general of Missouri. But George Caleb Bingham held up for Missourians that were on the other side. 20,000 Missourians, both pro-Union and pro-Southern, were forced under the famous Order Number 11 handed down by General Thomas Ewing to move from the western counties of Missouri. Their homes were burned, their cattle were taken, and in many cases their property was looted and divided up. And George Caleb Bingham, who went to Kansas City and approached General Ewing and said, please rescind the Order Number 11. General Ewing refused to do so. And as a result, George Caleb Bingham stated, I will make you infamous with my pen and with my brush. And that's exactly what he did. And if you want to see a copy of the painting, which was done by the most famous engraver in the United States and made into actual engravings, you can see one in the Cole County Historical Society. And I remember the lessons that Professor Parks told us about how you can use art and how you can use various other means to sometimes take an opposite approach and sometimes hold up for other individuals. The same thing been alluded to by Thomas Hart Benton, and the fact that the Speaker of the House and later our mayor in Jefferson City wanted those Benton murals painted over because he didn't think that Benton depicted Missourians as they should be depicted. Well, Benton painted what he thought Missourians were and what our true history was. It's kind of interesting because when I stop by that marker on these various tours, the next place that I stop is by the wonderful monument over on the Lincoln campus. And about 3 weeks ago on CBS, and some of you may have seen that, on the Sunday morning CBS show with Willie Geist, the person that they interviewed and featured their interview was Ed Dwight. And Ed Dwight was the first black American who was admitted into the space program. He was a test pilot. He was a captain in the United States Air Force. and he became the foremost African-American sculptor in our country and one of the foremost sculptors in our country. He has over 70 sculptures that are in the museum in St. Louis of the Gateway Arch. He's the one that designed and sculpted the wonderful monument at Lincoln University to the 62nd and 65th United States Colored Infantry. And Ed White, they posed to Ed White, do you think that monuments should be destroyed in this country? And his answer was, I think that some of them should be removed, but they should not be destroyed. And I thought that was very interesting, coming from an individual who had every right to say, based on the discrimination that he met in the United States military when he first joined. It was very interesting that he stated that. And so, I know that we've come to this crossroads. And I will say that what we need to do is I'm all in favor of there being some additional information added to the marker. But I can't very well show a marker and explain to people how divided our state was and how much Missourians, the civilian population, suffered at both the hands of Southern and Union soldiers at the time of the Civil War, if a marker is placed in some warehouse and forgotten about. There won't be anything to show. It's just like whenever at one time we talked about closing Chestnut Street. Well, it's darn hard for me to show the beautiful monument over at Lincoln University if I can't get to it. And so for that reason, I think that the marker should be retained and kept. I remember it very well. I grew up over in that neighborhood, played in the neighborhood on all those streets. We found a lot of Civil War projectiles in that particular neighborhood. So that's what I believe. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion and second for the amended resolution. Any discussion, further discussion on the amended resolution? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Hensley,
Nay.
Hussey,
Nay.
Kimna,
No.
Lester,
No.
Schreiber,
Aye.
Vogt,
No.
Ward,
No.
Wiseman,
No.
Fitzwater,
Yes.
Graham.
Nay.
Motion to
Resolution fails. So,
The motion to amend
I'm sorry,
failed.
the amended resolution. So we have the original resolution. So any further discussion on the original? Councilman Hensley?
Thank you. I think just about every person who approached the podium tonight and the individual on the phone said several times they used the word history, and that's a word that we've used, that we've heard used a lot during the several meetings on this. And everyone, I think, generally has an idea of what the word means. I think each person sort of comes up with the definition to, use in their own minds, and that colors how they view situations and some facts. But, the word has a meaning. And essentially, history is a branch of knowledge that records and explains past events and creates an established record. By contrast, the UDC's monument was intended to be anti-historical neo-Confederate propaganda. That's what it was when it showed up here, and that's what it remains today. And there's no amount of time that could pass that would ever transform it into history. The UDC's mission and their open propaganda campaign to celebrate the Confederacy, to honor the chivalry and bravery of its leaders and soldiers, and to rewrite the causes of the Civil War in terms more favorable to the South in hopes that it may rise again one day is amply documented, and it is not seriously disputed. So having their anti-historical displays accepted as alternatives to the verified historical record was precisely the goal of their propaganda campaign. And allowing this plaque to remain in the name of preserving history would pervert the definition of the word, and it would grant the UDC and similar neo-Confederate groups an unconscionable victory that they alone would enjoy. There would be no other winners in that, regardless of whatever might be installed on that property. Like my friend Councilman Schreiber, I have several generations back at least one trader to England, and I appreciate Councilman Schreiber's friendship and his work to help me get involved with people similarly situated. Also like him, I have folks who fought in the Civil War in my family. But like a lot of families with ancestors living across Tennessee in the 1800s, we have a few relatives who fought for the Confederacy, and at least one who went to fight for the Union. Thinking about those painful events and our place in them isn't new to us, but you know, when some folks look back on their family trees, they don't see rebel soldiers or UDC members or Klansmen, but ancestors kidnapped and sold into slavery, raped, torn from their families, lynched, denied the right to vote, to a decent education and equal accommodations, public accommodations, to equal justice under the law, people who were humiliated, beaten, murdered for simply demanding that they not be treated differently due to the color of their skin. These are things I will never have to explain to my kids as having directly threatened the lives of our relatives or stifling our family's growth and advancement in this country. And most of us won't. If we are to consider the feelings expressed by members of our community on this issue on both sides, and that's largely what's presented by opponents of this resolution, is essentially, in many cases it comes down to their feelings either about their ancestors or about their connection to the neighborhood or the community growing up, or deep connections with their childhoods. Let's consider everyone's feelings. But you have to listen to what people are telling us. So you have that on the one hand, you have this attachment to admitted propaganda in historical clothing, and then you have people telling us about deeply rooted, generations-long hurt that since childhood for them, this marker has represented. And I simply don't understand how you can put those things on an equal footing and say that anything that would ever attempt to compete with this plaque in any way would weigh against that, and that there's any weight to the plaque that would match the true history of what happened here. So whether or not our local leaders knew what the UDC was up to in 1933, and there's some indication that obviously they did, we know now, the people in this room know now, our entire community knows now, and we sitting here have a responsibility to no longer promote the cause of the Confederate States of America by publishing their propaganda on ground that belongs to all of the residents of this community, including, of course, our neighbors whose ancestors the Confederacy tore the nation apart to keep in bondage. This marker has never been and can never be history. The boys in gray were wrong, and we shouldn't promote their cause any longer. This marker has to be removed, and I strongly support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, deliberation? Councilman Hussey?
Thank you. I'll just briefly add a couple comments, and I think that Councilman Hensley echoed some of that by saying a lot of folks, I think, here tonight, if you talk about what the middle ground is, to me, it's an accurate portrayal of the Civil War history of this community. And that is, this conversation has unpacked that for a lot of people who weren't familiar with it. And I think to Councilman Schreiber's point about those tours that he gives, and, on that bus, what are you communicating to the folks who are visiting the community? You're probably, I would guess, telling them the story about the Union forces here and the efforts of the freed slaves and the German immigrants to stand up to the Confederacy. And so I look at it and say the middle ground in my eyes is to celebrate that, to collectively in 2020 come together as a community and write that. And I know that, to me, contextualizing something that's been in existence doesn't get us there. And sometimes I look at it and say you sort of have to wipe the slate clean and come together and say, okay. And I've heard that theme in multiple meetings of this and our committees and commissions, that I think there is a shared desire. Mr. Lanware has told that story a couple times about being a young boy, and I think that, accurate markers that communicate this community's history and its role with the Civil War will do the same thing. And I believe that if we do that in a collective effort, that school teachers may want to take kids to those then, to tell the story. Whatever we decide tonight, the Civil War is still getting taught in school tomorrow. And I always think about, when we talk about erasing history, is that everybody still learns about this. And it's not as though we've wiped that knowledge clean. There's no hidden agenda. There's no what's next. The agenda for me is simply to make sure that as a community we can discuss and debate issues that sometimes make us all a little uncomfortable, and come together with a decision that we may not all agree with at that moment, but that we can make a path forward on. And so I didn't necessarily completely disagree with Councilman Fitzwater's amendment. It's just, for me, it's not about contextualizing that. It's about the broader issue of saying, let's write this accurately and correctly for what it needs to be, and let's celebrate that. There are some really, really talented, intelligent people in this room tonight who have a personal connection to the history of this community, who have come to gain it through knowledge and research and reading and visiting sites. And I would love for us as a council and a community to certainly tap into that and build upon that. But it feels pretty clear that the particular, whether it's the words on the plaque, it is divisive. It really turns up some harsh feelings. I can't place myself in the shoes of folks who receive those letters or what that's like, and I certainly won't try to. But I look at it to say, let's remove this, and let's move on to what's next. And what I mean by what's next, it's not about tearing something else down. It's about us as a community coming together, and those that want to be a part of that working together to make sure that we tell that story correctly, that we find a way to celebrate that history and stand together on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions, comments, deliberation? Councilman Kemna? I'll make it quick because I know a lot has been said. And I agree with a lot of what John and Ken and others have said. and I think even Jan hit on it and Jay Barnes hit on it. You know, talk about history and telling a story, you have to look at what was the organization that's trying to tell this story with this marker, and that's the UDC. This is the same organization that issued textbooks that were taught across the South that depicted slavery as not being a bad thing, you know? And so we have to look at it from the context of who's telling the story. And that's the thing that bothers me a lot, is who's telling the story. Their ideologies, their mission statement, how they're trying to preserve Confederate ideas, that's an issue. So for that's one of the main reasons why I am in agreement with a lot of what's being said, and that this needs to be removed. So I'll just keep it short. Thank you. Councilwoman Ward.
Just real quick, too, I know everyone's time is precious, and I would just like to echo, too, some of the things that have been said by my fellow councilmen here. I really am passionate about historic preservation. I moved here in Jefferson City in 1999 for Catholic education for our children. And I became very concerned about demolitions that were occurring in this city of historic structures, so I became very involved in historic preservation, serving on Historic City of Jefferson's board, serving as vice president and secretary, serving on the city's Historic Preservation Commission, working to strengthen our demolition ordinance. I also have restored 2 historic properties, one on the National Register, and this marker, even though it isn't a historic district that is on the National Register, it can be removed. It's not a contributing feature of the district, and unless something is being demolished and that's on the National Register, it can be. What can be built on the site just can't use federal funding. So regardless of that, I share with Councilman Schreiber passion for historic preservation, and if this was truly just a historical marker, I would not be in favor of removing it. I have heard that this has been called a symbol of peace, and a marker of peace, and a monument of peace. It is not that. It was not placed there for that reason. So, therefore, that is the reason why I sponsored this resolution. In my frustrations from everything that I've heard this entire summer regarding this marker, I have spoken to my black friends who have not been vocal, and I understand why they're not vocal. They don't have a voice, because this is what happens when they come forward. And when I expressed my frustrations and concerns with them, simple answer: well, now you know what I go through every day. I don't know what it's like to be black. I was raised to be respectful, and my dad once told us he could not be a black man because he is such a proud man, and he could not live every day of being looked at and judged for walking down the street, for dressing a certain way, for going into a store. And our parents opened our eyes to that's what is going on. And we need, in our daily kindness and our daily interactions, to realize that and make it better. I apologize to those who have received letters of hate, and I just hope this is a night that makes history, that we can move forward more together. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Comments? Councilman?
Yeah, I just want to say, when the UDC placed this marker in Jefferson City in 1933, it was part of a very broad campaign that had been going on since the 1890s to vindicate what they believed was Confederacy valor in fighting for a just and right cause to preserve the Southern way of life, including white supremacy. The markers stood here for 87 years. To me, aptly, it's been young people who've questioned the appropriateness of the marker. They ask, why does the city continue to sponsor a marker placed in the public square when it was part of a patently racist organization's propaganda campaign? I've heard some argue that removing the marker is buying into cancel culture, that somehow its removal is a slippery slope that'll lead to tearing down other statues and monuments to historic leaders like Jefferson and Washington. Those on the council who will vote to remove this marker are some of the strongest advocates for preserving such historic monuments and statues. This marker is not in the same category as those historic memorials. It's not even in the same universe of categories as those. The slippery slope that has not been discussed directly is that the UDC marker helped grease, which led our society into a pit of racism and Jim Crow laws, the negative impact of which is still with us. That's why it needs to be removed. And like I said before, I certainly wouldn't be opposed to it being placed in a more appropriate context that reflects that history that needs to be remembered of how racism got perpetuated in our society.
Thank you. Any further deliberation? If not, we will take up the original resolution. Okay, seeing none, roll call, please.
Hussey?
Aye.
Kimna?
Aye.
Lester?
Aye.
Schreiber?
Nay.
Vogt?
Aye.
Ward? Aye. Wiseman?
Aye.
Fitzwater?
No.
Graham?
Aye.
Hensley?
Aye.
Resolution passes. And I do appreciate everyone's time. I know there's been several meetings, and we do appreciate that. And I think what's more important than the marker itself is that we will not allow it to divide us. And I'm extremely thankful for the fact that in Jefferson City that we can have these discussions in a respectful manner. So appreciate that very much. I want to thank everyone for that. So we will take a 5-minute break. Keep going. Okay, bills introduced, 2020-37.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, amending Chapter 19, Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Schedule J, parking prohibited by the modification of Bel Air Drive.
Mr. Smith.
My apologies, I was expecting a recess after that. Don't have this up yet, just a second.
No problem.
Yes, Mayor, as the clerk stated, this bill would authorize would permit the parking in an area near Bel Air School. This was an issue that was brought to the commission from the principal of Bel Air School and was taken up by the Transportation and Traffic Commission where approval was recommended. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, 2020-38.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, amending Chapter 19, Motor Vehicles and Traffic by the modification of parking and loading zones adjacent to Morrow Heights School.
Mr. Smith?
Yes, as clerk mentioned, this would modify the current bus loading area by Morrow Heights School to allow for short-term parking through the day in that bus zone. This was an issue brought to the commission from the school district,
and was taken up by the Transportation and Traffic Commission, which, with approval being recommended. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Okay, 2020-39.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute an agreement with Stockman Construction Corporation in the amount of $108,667.60 for the Leonard Drive Stormwater Replacement Project.
Mr. Smith.
Yes, this bill would authorize a contract for some stormwater improvements in the areas of Sioux and Leonard. The staff is recommending the best bidder, which was in this case not the lowest bidder. This issue was discussed at the Public Works and Planning Commission meeting, most recent, and was brought forward to the council from there. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? 2020-40.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute an agreement with Arc Nexus LLC in the amount of $174,973 for the airport parking lot project and to supplementally appropriate additional funds from the airport fund balance in FY 2021.
Mr. Smith.
Yes, this bill would authorize a contract with Arc Nexus LLC to improve our parking lot. This work is in association with our public-private partnership with the new airport administration building, which is currently under construction, and would also repair some flood damage that we received most recently. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, 2020-41.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri amending the FY20 budget of the City of Jefferson, Missouri by supplementally appropriating additional funds within the general fund to allow for the replacement of 6 hail-damaged police vehicles.
Chief Schrader. Thank you. This bill would authorize a supplemental appropriation to the 1920 purchase of vehicles account to allow for spending of the general fund balance to replace 6 police patrol vehicles which have been or will be designated a total loss as a result of hail damage sustained in March of 2020. I also believe there may be a motion. Do we have a request from Councilman Graham?
Yes, Madam Mayor. After further discussion with Mr. Heisland and Chief, I'd like to ask that we suspend the rules tonight and take up 2020-041 for its final reading tonight.
Okay, we've had a request to suspend the rules. Is there any objections? Seeing none, we will take up 2020-41.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri amending the FY20 budget of the City of Jefferson, Missouri by supplementally appropriation additional funds within the general fund to allow for the replacement of 6 hail-damaged police vehicles.
Any further deliberation or questions? Councilman Hesse?
I do have a question. Are we receiving any sort of insurance settlement for the 6 vehicles that are being replaced?
Yes, we received 2 payments for 2 vehicles which have already been designated a total loss in the amount of $22,050. We anticipate 6 total will be designated a total loss, and the funds received from the insurance company for the additional 4 vehicles would also be committed or are committed to the general fund, reserve fund.
Having not cross-referenced the vehicle list you provide in the budget process, can I draw the assumption that these 6 vehicles would have shown up on a replacement list, either they were this year or would be again next year?
There's no overlap between, coincidentally, there's no overlap between the ones that will be replaced as a result of the deliberations by the council this summer and the ones that sustained the hail damage in March.
Okay. Well, I guess my point was, this is essentially replacing 6 vehicles. So that list every year that was 15, 21 vehicles that, I don't know how many we did this budget cycle. Was that 7, 5? That maybe gone down to 16. This will now essentially take another 6 of them off the list?
That's correct.
Okay,
yes,
thank
yes,
you. I mean,
yes,
the
short answer is those 6 that we're requesting be replaced now are on that list. That was presented this summer.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or deliberation? Roll call, please.
Kimna? Aye. Lester?
Aye.
Schreiber?
Aye.
Vogt? Ward? Aye. Wiseman? Aye. Fitzwater?
Aye.
Graham?
Aye.
Hensley?
Aye.
Hussey.
Aye.
Bill passes. Bills pending, we've already taken up. Nothing on the informal. Resolution 2020-14.
A resolution accepting CARES funds from the Federal Transit Administration.
Mr. Smith. Yes, this resolution would authorize the acceptance of a grant from the Federal Transit Administration for a little over $2.3 million in CARES Act relief funds. The intention is for those grant funds to be expended over the next 3 years. Be happy to answer any questions. Thank you. Any questions? All right.
Make them,
Sorry,
I
Councilman Hussey.
don't have a question. I would make a motion to approve the resolution.
All right.
Second.
Awesome. We have a motion and second. Any further discussion on the resolution? All in favor, or roll call, I'm sorry.
Lester.
Aye.
Schreiber. Vogt. Ward. Wiseman.
Aye.
Fitzwater.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Hensley.
Aye.
Hussey.
Aye.
Kimna.
Aye.
Resolution passes. Resolution 2020-15.
A resolution of the City of Jefferson, Missouri adopting the CDBG 2020 Action Plan and authorizing its submission to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Ms. Senzi.
Hi. The 2020 Action Plan is tied to 2020 federal fiscal year dollars. It's actually, the implementation date is actually going to take place in 2021. I'll cut to the chase and get to the budget table. If I can here. If you guys have any questions about how we solicited public comments and the whole process of how we do the action plan, please feel free to ask.
And I would just interject for a moment.
Sure.
That Ms. Senzi did do a thorough presentation at the Public Works and Planning Committee meeting, so it's been vetted once by the committee process, so I don't want folks to think that you're skipping things that the council, or some members of the council have seen already.
I feel like people want to see the budget anyway. So we have our planned budget. We are receiving a little over $306,000 as far as for our 2020 federal allocation. We also anticipate roughly the $78,000 in program income that we are paying back to DED for the 408 Lafayette. That's going to turn around, circle, and come back in through our entitlement fund. We also have some FY19 funds that are going to roll over. So if you look through your packet, you can't see it very well on the screen, but we are going to fund roughly 25 down payment assistance applications, 5 minor home repair applications, which are up to $5,000 for exterior repairs. We are going to fund infrastructure improvements, which tend to be sidewalks, for a little under $250,000. $80,000 in demolition. That'll be about 4 structures, depending on the cost and the size. And then we do have a 20% admin cap of each year. So what would happen after council? Once you vote to approve and adopt the action plan, we submit to HUD. They do have some time to do their own public process, and then once they adopt our plan, they release our 2020 allocation funds in an award, and then we start implementing starting in 2021. With that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you. Any, Councilman Hussey?
I would make a motion to approve the resolution.
We have a motion.
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Schreiber. Vogt. Ward.
Aye.
Wiseman. Fitzwater.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Hensley.
Aye.
Hussey.
Aye.
Kimna.
Aye.
Lester.
Aye.
Resolution passes. Thank you. 2020-16.
A resolution approving the St. Mary's Hospital Community Improvement District's resolution number 2020-9.
And that is Mr. Molman.
Thank you. The Old St. Mary's Hospital Community Improvement District Board of Directors has submitted a slate of successor directors for its Board of Directors. Under the SID Act and the agreement controlling the St. Mary's Hospital Community Improvement District, the City Council, or the Mayor, with the consent of the City Council, would approve the consent directors, successor directors named by the St. Mary's CID Board of Directors include Gina Thoenen, John Sheenan, and Margie Miller to serve as successor directors, each serving a term of 4 years. So this is consistent with the CID Act and the development agreement controlling the CID.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Any questions, further discussion? Roll call, please.
Vote. Ward. Aye. Wiseman. Fitzwater.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Hensley.
Aye.
Hussey.
Aye.
Kimna.
Aye.
Lester.
Aye.
Schreiber.
Resolution passes. Resolution 2020-17.
A resolution approving the fire service mutual aid agreement between Cole County and the city.
Chief Schofield. Yes, this is an update to an existing mutual aid agreement we have with the Cole County Fire Protection District. Very standard language here that reflects what is in state statute already. Really nothing out of the ordinary with this. The last time we ratified this or brought this before council was in 2001, and so they just brought it to us and wanted it to be updated and reaffirmed. So that's what this resolution represents. Happy to answer any questions. Councilman Schreiber. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Ward. Aye. Wiseman. Fitzwater.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Hensley.
Aye.
Hussey.
Aye.
Kimna.
Aye.
Lester.
Aye.
Schreiber. Vote. Ward. Or I'm sorry, I already called Ward. Motion passes. I didn't.
Resolution passes. All right. Item 16, presentations from the gallery. Anyone signed up? Emily? For presentations?
No.
No? Okay. Item 17, any council and staff discussion. 18, any new business. 19, motion to approve the 10, October 5th closed session minutes.
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Wiseman. Fitzwater.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Hensley.
Aye.
Hussey.
Aye.
Kimna.
Abstain.
Lester.
Aye.
Schreiber. Vote. Ward.
All right.
Aye.
Motion passes, and we have a motion to adjourn in a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Good night, everybody.